When I went to college, I wanted to be an astronaut. And if you had told me that I was going to become an insurance agent and a poet, I would have totally disbelieved you. But here, 50 years later, that is indeed what I am. Sam I am eats green eggs and ham. And for all my life, I have been Sam I am. These words I rhyme are not to preach. Please listen close. I wish to teach some thoughts of what I did and do, the roles I've played, both old and new. I'm just tombstone salesman's son. That's not a joke, and that's not a pun. I have farmed the land and cut the glass, a homecoming king. I led the class. I once sold pizzas, hot dogs, and beer. I like serving people, that much is clear. I've changed from lover to spouse to dad. I do my best, I'm a hard-working lad. Now it's life I sell, for death is sure. Embracing love is the only cure. From all the things I've seen and done, I'm still just a granite salesman's son. And thus you see how Sam I am became a life insurance man. And that's what I am, a life insurance man. Here, 50 years later, not an astronaut. Disappointing as that is, I'm an insurance man. And I have to say that actually I became an insurance man and a poet at the very same time. It was back in 1976 after graduating from college and deciding to leave Kearney, Nebraska and move west. And so on my way to Denver, driving across that flatland of nowhereness on I-76, the radio wasn't picking up any signal in those days. And so I just turned it off and started listening to the road, and a verse came to mind at that time, and I've remembered that verse ever since. And lonely, lonely me, just searching to be free to dream a dream one day of a place called Santa Fe. And I guess for the life of me, I'll keep a searching just to be. You see, I was actually going to go to Santa Fe. But I made it to Denver and visited a cousin, and next thing you know, I'm working for Pennsylvania Life Insurance Company. I went through the process of getting my license and registered, and then they sent me, not in the city, which is where I was really thinking that would be fun, they sent me out to eastern Colorado. Now, eastern Colorado looks just like Nebraska. Driving around places like Ovid and Akron and Last Chance, Colorado, in this most desolate place, talking to ranchers and farmers, dressed in a bow tie and a plaid suit with big lapels and high-heeled shoes with a big afro. I did not sell a single policy. 3 months later, I moved back home broke. And on that road back home, that little verse changed. And lonely, lonely me, just searching to be free to dream a dream one day of a lover whose love would stay. And I guess for the life of me, I'll keep a searching just to be. Sure enough, I ended up back in Kearney, Nebraska, and a restaurant opens right next to where my parents lived. And I went to work there as the day cook. And there was a young lady named Mary who was the waitress, the first waitress. I was the first cook. She was the first waitress. 5 years later, we got married. We'd opened up 3 more restaurants in that time, and eventually found ourselves moving to Colorado. On my honeymoon, I actually made that verse a little different. As long as my life shall be, as happy as when I'm with thee, I dream of the day when we each shall stay in the arms of each other as we. Mary always cries when I say that. So in Colorado, we opened up 3 more restaurants, had 7 altogether, changed the name from what was Ken's Pizza to Valentino's Pizza, Valentino's Italian Ristorante. And I'm not even Italian. Then we had a daughter. We bought a home, had our first daughter, Samantha. 3 months after working in the restaurant. In the restaurant, running 7 restaurants was a big job. I was working 80 hours a week at least. Mary was tolerant of that. She had been a waitress. In many cases, she worked with me. But now, I had this little girl. I'd gone 3 days without seeing her awake, leaving before she got up, home after she was in bed. And my heart just broke. I realized that fatherhood really required being present. You just don't be a father because you had a baby. And so I quit. Bad decision. In 1986, The economy was in terrible situation. You may remember something called Reaganomics. Well, that was because interest rates were at 14%. Credit cards were earning 22%. Unemployment was at 10%. So I struggled trying to find a job outside of the restaurant world that I'd known so well for 10 years. I even went back to college thinking I could get an engineering degree. But that did not happen. And so I found myself back in the restaurant world, and there went to work at the Marriott Hotel. I was the assistant dining room manager. After being a part owner of 7 restaurants, I'm now just running one little restaurant for breakfast in the hotel. Less than a year later, I ended up being the food and beverage director for the hotel. And that day that I got that appointment, that job, was the day Jessica, my second daughter, was born. And again, struggled with how much work was required. Sure enough, Marriott Corporation secured a contract at CSU, and I became a concessionaire. I took over for Marriott the campus operation of CSU's Moby and Hughes Stadium food service. And that was pretty good. I went from selling prime rib and cognac in the hotel to selling beer and hot dogs for the same price. I did that for 9 more years, 11 years actually, and shortly after 2011, or 2001, 9/11, right after 9/11, then things all changed. And I decided to move on. I got invited by the guy that had been the general manager at the Marriott Hotel, who now became my farmer's insurance agent and had been for the last 10 years, to become his office manager. And so I moved back into the world of insurance. And I remember point blank asking him when he offered me the job, do I have to sell insurance? And his answer was, no, I need somebody to manage my agency. And I said, yes. And it turns out I have to sell insurance. That's what I do. That's the role the agents play in this big corporation. There's a claims department, there's an underwriting department, there's the sales department, and agents are at the sales department. Well, Craig and I ran a very good agency for the next 17 years and succeeded at selling that farmer's agency for the highest amount that any farmer's agency in the United States has sold on a per policy basis. Set a record. Craig was a very good man to work with. But the company made him split the agency amongst 2 agents because it was so big. And neither of those agents were big enough now to need a manager. And so I had to go find a new job. I had to retool for a new job, but I chose to keep the old one. I stayed a farmer's agent by going to work with the Clint Alder Agency. Now, Clint, he too became an insurance man right out of college, just like his dad, John, who had become an insurance agent right out of college, just like his dad's father-in-law, who was a farmer's insurance agent down in Denver, just like his grandfather, who in 1928 was a life insurance agent with New York Life. So they have tons of insurance experience. Clint's agency is the oldest in the city and has the best retention ratio in the entire state. Why? Because John, 24 years earlier, sold those clients. And then, when he was 46 years old, died of cancer. Well, that was because in John's day, the way he did business was dial for dollars. He called people, they answered their phone. They didn't have ID, and they answered their phone. And he talked to them, and sure enough, they bought policies. And John grew his agency to being the largest agency in the city of Fort Collins, and then died. And his college son, Clint, took over the agency. Now, what that really means is that a bunch of Clint's clients are really old. Most of those policies written in 1975, 76, 77. And these people, in fact, just last week, 3 of them died. That's how old they are. So my new job in the agency is to find new blood. I'm to help bring in the newlyweds, the new car buyer, the new home buyer, not the ones buying coffins. I have been working with Clint now for several months, and our numbers have actually increased tremendously over what it was previously. And it's very exciting. I've also found another opportunity in the Medicare world by connecting up with a man named Jack Creer. And Jack, a phenomenal salesperson, phenomenal insurance agent, has been in the healthcare industry, healthcare insurance for 2 decades. Previous to that, was a life insurance agent for 2 decades. So he, much like me, is pretty old. But Medicare is meant for old people. And that's what we do. I'm getting ready to start the Medicare season, just getting my appointment, just getting all my licensing, getting everything put in place. But between doing homes and cars for people and life insurance, I also get to do Medicare and help people with health insurance issues. And in many ways, the most rewarding part of my job is that as an insurance agent, you get to be a hero. When somebody's car gets hailed on, you're the guy that gets to fix it. When somebody's roof gets damaged, you're the guy that fixes it. When somebody's house burns down, not only do you rebuild their house, but you pay for a place for them to live at while their house is being rebuilt, and you buy all their technology and their toys and their clothing and furniture for them. You're a hero. And I really like that part. I can't say that I've had to deliver a life insurance policy yet, but they tell me that that's a very rewarding thing. I think it could be pretty sad, but I think being able to walk in and give somebody $100 or $200 or $1 million check could be pretty exciting. In any case, I am indeed a life insurance man, and I was indeed, and still am, the son of a tombstone salesman. Thank you.